You are the woman who most deserves the most beautiful ring in the world. Let's stay together forever." Hearing my husband's sweet voice coming from the next table, I quietly set down my cup of Earl Grey tea. In the tranquil atmosphere of that exclusive French restaurant in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, the soft notes of a live piano echoed beautifully. Today was October 15th, the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. However, the person sitting across from my husband, who was currently holding a glass of the most expensive vintage champagne, wasn't me. It was an unfamiliar woman wearing a red dress far flashier and more revealing than anything I had ever worn, hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a large shawl that covered half my face. I slowly smiled. There wasn't a single drop of sadness left in me. Only the cold touch of an object stashed in my purse kept me completely serene. In exactly 30 minutes. When that woman looked at the inside of the ring with an ear-to-ear smile, it would all be over. "Oh, Sterling, you make me so happy. It's my first time at such an incredible restaurant." The mistress pronounced my husband's name in a sickeningly sweet tone. Sloane, 32 years old, a receptionist at one of my husband's client firms. I knew her face, her name, and the address of her apartment perfectly. For the past 3 months, the private investigator I'd hired had meticulously reported her every move. "For you, this is nothing, Sloane. Besides, my real estate firm is going to post the highest profits in its history this quarter. You are my good luck charm." Sterling, his face slightly flushed, puffed out his chest with sheer arrogance. Hearing those words, I almost let out a sigh. The highest profits in its history. That wasn't Sterling's doing. It was the result of the executives who broke their backs adjusting the finances in the shadows, bowing their heads to their oldest clients. But he was utterly convinced it was his own triumph. Surely in his mind, there wasn't the slightest memory of my existence, of when I used to manage the company's bookkeeping all by myself, spending countless sleepless nights balancing the ledgers. I remembered what had happened that very morning. Sterling had meticulously styled his hair in front of the mirror, and instead of the tie I'd bought him for his birthday, he had put on a flashy designer tie I didn't recognize. "I have a very important business dinner tonight. I might close a massive deal. I'll be late, so don't save me any dinner and go to bed early." He said it without looking me in the eye even once. "All right, have a great time. Good luck with work." I saw him off with my usual smile. I knew perfectly well that not a single word of congratulations for our 20th anniversary would cross his lips. The Sterling of the past was different. 20 years ago, when we first got married, he was a simple clerk at a small manufacturing plant on the South Side. His salary was meager, and we barely made ends meet. On our first anniversary, he took me to a modest neighborhood diner and shyly handed me a silver ring that barely cost a few bucks. "I'm sorry. This is all I can afford right now. But I promise you that someday I'll be the CEO of my own company, and I'll buy you a ring 100 times more expensive. Please always stay by my side and support me." I still remember the clumsy but sincere look in his eyes back then. Believing in those words, I continued to support him. When he branched out and founded his real estate agency, I invested my entire life savings. Despite having to live with my mother-in-law Beatrice and enduring her daily insults, I held on with all my strength so Sterling could focus on his work. But as the company grew and people started calling him CEO, something began to twist. He started coming home late, his suits reeking of expensive nightclub perfume and cigar smoke. His attitude toward me grew cold, treating me as if I were merely a convenient maid to keep around the house. "Hey, Sterling, do you really get along with your wife?" Sloane's voice snapped me back to reality. She tilted her head slightly, looking at him with pleading eyes. "You mean Rosalind Baugh? She's just a roommate now. All she thinks about is taking care of my mother and doing household chores. She doesn't have an ounce of appeal left as a woman. She's not someone who makes my heart race just by being together like you do." Sterling dropped those words without the slightest hesitation, swirling his wine glass. "Just a roommate," I murmured in my mind, more than anger. I felt an immense emptiness, listening to such predictable words. If I had been the Rosalind of a year ago, perhaps I would have jumped up crying and screaming at his betrayal, throwing everything I had done for him in his face. But the Rosalind of today was different. My tears had dried up entirely. If I was sitting at this adjacent table, it wasn't to make a cheap scene by catching my husband red-handed. I was here to silently witness from a front row seat. The culmination of 20 years of my life and the exact moment their world would begin to plummet. A waiter wove through the tables and placed a beautifully decorated dessert plate in front of Sterling and Sloane. "Wow, how gorgeous!" Sloane exclaimed in awe. Resting next to the plate was a small velvet box. Sterling, flashing, a smile brimming with confidence, picked up the box. "Sloane, we've only known each other for 6 months, but since I've been with you, I feel reborn. I want you to accept this." Sterling slowly opened the box. Even under the dim restaurant lighting, the diamond inside flashed with blinding brilliance, a top-tier sparkle that couldn't have cost less than tens of thousands of dollars. I can't believe it, Sterling. Is it for me? Sloane covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes watering, trembling with joy. Go on, put it on. The size should be right. Encouraged by him, Sloane took the ring out with shaking hands and slid it onto her left ring finger. It fits perfectly. It feels like a dream. Do I really deserve to be this happy? Of course, you are the most important person to me. Watching their sickeningly sweet exchange, I took a sip of my tea. It was completely cold and terribly bitter. Sloane couldn't stop staring at her finger, overflowing with happiness. Then she suddenly took the ring off, held it up to the light, and peered inside. Hey, Sterling, it looks like there's something engraved inside the ring. The letters are so small I can't really read them. Sloane narrowed her eyes. Sterling also looked puzzled. Engraved, I didn't ask for any inscription. Maybe it's the brand's logo. No, that's not it, Sterling. Under my hat, I offered an icy smile. The jewelry store where you pre-ordered that ring is now run by the owner of the small watch shop where we bought our first silver bands. The jeweler is an old friend of mine. You don't know that you doctored the company's expense reports to buy that ring for your mistress. And you also don't know that before it was delivered to you, I asked my friend to engrave a very specific set of words inside it. Look, do you see it? It says... Sloane tried to slowly read the words inside the band. In that instant, the sweet smile vanished from her face like a receding tide. Her cheeks, previously flushed, turned waxen pale and the ring slipped from her fingers, hitting the table with a cold metallic clink. Sterling stared at her in utter shock, unable to comprehend what had happened as he saw Sloane's distorted expression. I watched the scene in silence from behind my shawl. I slowly stood up and headed toward the restaurant's exit. I had no intention of speaking to them. My goal wasn't to insult them in public or cause a scene. The cool night breeze against my face felt refreshing. I got into a taxi, and as I watched the Chicago city lights pass by the window, I let out a deep sigh. If I had told my friends about this, they all would have told me to divorce him immediately and wring him out for hefty alimony. I had more than enough proof of his infidelity in the investigators' reports, but a 20-year bond isn't something so light that it can be severed with a simple piece of paper. Inside me burned a wife's pride that I refused to abandon and a silent, heavy obsession that I would not allow these 2 decades to have been in vain. The place I was returning to was an imposing mansion situated in a quiet, exclusive residential area in Lake Forest, an enviable estate built on the growth of Sterling's real estate agency. But to me, that place was nothing more than a prison of ice. As I opened the front door, the smell of disinfectant and that characteristic musty scent of the elderly assaulted my nose. Rosalind, you're so late. I was dying of thirst. From the living room sofa, the shrill voice of my mother-in-law Beatrice welcomed me. Beatrice was 75. Since she fell in the house 5 years ago and broke her hip, she found it difficult to walk on her own and depended on me for almost all her daily needs. I hurriedly took off my coat, washed my hands, and prepared her a hot tea. I'm sorry, Beatrice. Grocery shopping took a bit longer than expected. Grocery shopping. I'm sure you were just wasting time loitering in that cheap supermarket as always. My Sterling is a CEO. You should take better care of your appearance and behave in a way that doesn't embarrass our family. Beatrice took the cup I offered, looking at me with disdain as she spat her venom. I woke up at 5:00 a.m., prepared special low-sodium meals for her hypertension, and helped her with everything from using the bathroom to bathing, all without a single complaint. It wasn't rare for my back to scream in pain, waking me up in the middle of the night. Yet in these 20 years, not a single word of gratitude had ever left Beatrice's mouth. You should be grateful you were allowed into this family, being an uneducated woman who was just a clerk. Sterling is too kind. That's why he picked you up off the street. Beatrice never liked my background. At family gatherings, she openly stated that her son could have found a much more suitable girl from high society. Despite having mobility issues and being unable to even use the restroom without me, her abnormal pride and contemptuous attitude toward her daughter-in-law hadn't changed. I didn't marry imagining days like this. 20 years ago, in a 400 square foot rental apartment, I remembered Sterling handing me that cheap silver ring. Someday I'll be a great businessman and I'll make you the happiest woman in the world, so please always support me. Believing in that clumsy marriage proposal, I dedicated my entire youth to him. When Sterling branched out on his own, I worked mornings as a cashier at a grocery store. And at night, I helped him with his company's accounting without charging a dime. I spent many sleepless nights balancing the books, where a discrepancy of even a single dollar wasn't allowed. I even gave him the $25,000 I had saved before we got married so he could use it as capital. Rosalind, this is all thanks to you. You are my savior. Sterling had grabbed my hands and cried when he told me that. I still wanted to believe those tears had been real. However, when the company started doing well and the number of employees grew, Sterling gradually changed. You don't need to do the accounting anymore. From now on, I'll hire a professional CPA. You don't need to come to the office. Stay home and take care of my mother. That was the moment he forcibly severed my ties with society and turned me into the family maid. To Sterling, who cared about appearances more than anything in the world, I was just a decorative piece, the devoted wife who dutifully cared for his aging mother. The nights I collapsed in tears from my mother-in-law's cruel comments and the exhaustion of caregiving, Sterling would turn his back to me and say coldly, "My mother is old. Have a little patience. I exhaust myself making money out there. Handle the house stuff quietly on your own." Since that day, I stopped expecting anything from him. The love had grown cold a long time ago. I buried my trust in him as a husband and my efforts to get close to my mother-in-law deep within my heart. If I hadn't slapped divorce papers in his face, it was because I couldn't forgive the fact that after taking everything from me and using me as a servant, they would continue living happily. If I left the house without saying a word, Sterling would tell everyone that his wife had fled her caregiving responsibilities and would immediately move that young, pretty mistress in as his new wife. My last 20 years would end up being just a useless stepping stone. I flatly refused to accept such a pathetic ending. When I left this house, it would be after settling the score for everything they had stolen from me and showing them harsh reality. That's why I swore internally that I would keep wearing the mask of the perfect, submissive wife. However, in the midst of those days of despair where I repressed my emotions, an incident sparked the definitive fire in my heart. It happened 3 months ago. As usual, I was checking the pockets of the suit Sterling had tossed into the laundry bin before taking it to the dry cleaner. Suddenly, a faint, sweet perfume scent reached my nose. It wasn't mine. It was an intense floral fragrance, the type young girls wear. From the inside pocket of the suit jacket, a thin folded piece of paper fell out. It was a receipt from a luxury hotel restaurant on the Magnificent Mile. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't the $400 dinner bill or the hotel's name. It was the company name written on the invoice, and above all, the words scrawled in Sterling's handwriting on the back of the paper. A $400 receipt with a faint trace of pale pink lipstick on the back. Undoubtedly in the handwriting I had seen for decades, it read, "Slush Fund, Penthouse Down Payment and Birthday Trip." The moment I saw those words, my blood ran cold. When I handled the company's accounting alone, there was no suspicious slush fund. Back then, we made a pact not to waste a single cent of the company's money, putting everything toward employee salaries and growth investments. We hesitated even to buy a pen for the office, managing the funds with sheer desperation. But this note could only mean one thing. Sterling had created a shadow account to illegally divert company funds so he could support his mistress. This wasn't just a simple affair. He was betraying the company we had built with blood, sweat, and tears, and the employees who worked honestly for it. My hands trembled with rage. However, I took several photos of the receipt with my phone camera, folded it exactly as it had been, and silently returned it to the inside pocket of his jacket. If I demanded an explanation now, he would surely invent a cheap lie to escape. I needed to gather harder evidence before he destroyed it. The next morning, Sterling sat at the dining table with his usual sour expression. "Hey, Rosalind, this broth is a bit bland. I always tell you I prefer it with more flavor. I'm sorry. It's just that since Beatrice has high blood pressure, I make it low sodium," I replied calmly. Sterling let out a loud sigh and dropped his spoon. "You can't make food for my mother one way and for me another. You spend all day stuck in the house. You should have plenty of free time. Oh, and lately household expenses have been way too high, haven't they? I'm cutting your allowance this month. It costs me a lot to maintain the company's public relations out there." The absolute nerve. The man who spent $400 on a dinner with his mistress and was about to buy her a diamond ring worth thousands of dollars was giving me lectures on austerity. "It's true, Rosalind, you are a terrible manager," Beatrice chimed in from the sofa. "Sterling is a great businessman. It's normal for him to have expenses outside the house. By the way, I saw a new massage chair on TV that I want. They say it costs about $5,000. You'll buy it for me, right, Sterling?" "Of course, Mom, whatever you want. Rosalind, order the catalog later." Sterling was always extremely accommodating to his mother, who constantly idolized him. "Thank you so much. My son is definitely the only one I can rely on. Not like a certain daughter-in-law who looks like a starving beggar. It's the limit." Beatrice laughed at me with disdain triumphant. A $5,000 massage chair and the hundreds of dollars he was going to cut from the monthly grocery budget. When Sterling got up and walked past me toward the door, that same intense sweet perfume from the night before wafted over. I simply carried the dirty dishes to the sink in silence. That afternoon, taking advantage of my mother-in-law being at the adult daycare center and the house being completely silent, I called a middle-aged man. Vance was one of the oldest executives who had shared our struggles and triumphs since Sterling founded the company. He was a man of few words but honest. Back when I did the bookkeeping, we were like comrades in arms. Many times the three of us would spend the night eating sandwiches while working. Rosalind, it's been so long. Vance's voice on the other end of the line sounded terribly exhausted. Vance, I'm sorry to call you out of the blue. Could you spare a moment? After some hesitation, we agreed to meet at an old retro diner near the company. An hour later, Vance appeared at a corner booth with almost entirely white hair and deeply pronounced bags under his eyes. You really surprised me. We haven't heard from you in years, Rosalind. I'm truly sorry, but I had something to ask you, Vance. I lowered my voice, looking around. I'll get straight to the point. Isn't something strange going on with the company's money? Hearing my words, Vance's shoulders flinched and he set his coffee cup down sharply on the saucer. He knew. Vance let out a deep sigh and began to speak with an anguished expression. Truth is, for the past year, under the CEO's orders, there's been a series of irregular expenses. Every month, thousands of dollars disappear under the guise of fake consulting fees or inflated entertainment costs. When the accounting department asks for explanations, the boss starts yelling, saying it's his company and no one should interfere. At this rate, we don't know if we'll be able to make payroll next month. The younger employees are scared and are starting to resign. So that was it. Sterling was willing to destroy his own company to maintain his lifestyle with a mistress who stroked his ego. Vance, does the name Slush Fund sound familiar to you regarding these transfers? Slush Fund? No, there is no account with that name on the company's official books, he said, tilting his head. I understand. Thank you for telling me, Vance. Let me look into things on my end. Rosalind, did something happen with Sterling? Don't worry, leave it in my hands. I promise I won't let you all end up on the street. I promised him that and left the diner. Arriving home, with a silent determination, I opened the door to Sterling's home office on the second floor. Normally, I didn't enter this room except to clean because Sterling had strictly forbidden me from touching anything, claiming he kept vital company documents there. I knew his personality perfectly. He was a show-off but careless when it mattered. He had a habit of hiding important things within arm's reach, behind the bookshelf in the desk drawers under the rug. After searching for an hour, I noticed a strange gap at the back of the bottom desk drawer. Carefully lifting the back panel, I found a black folder and a bank ledger I didn't recognize. Feeling my heart beat faster, I opened the ledger. The account holder was neither Sterling nor the company. But what truly froze my blood was a contract tucked beside the ledger. The moment I saw the cover of that contract, I couldn't believe my eyes. Not only did the mistress's name appear on it, looking at the real estate purchase agreement hidden under the unknown ledger, I held my breath. It detailed the address of a luxury penthouse in Streeterville, Chicago, and a purchase price of over $1.5 million. In the buyer's box appeared my husband's name, Sterling. But what made me tremble with true terror and rage was the box below it, Joint Guarantor Rosalind. There, it was clearly written my name. The handwriting was undoubtedly Sterling's. And next to my name was a notary seal and a copy of my driver's license, along with a digital signature confirmation using my DocuSign credentials, which he had stolen. I felt the blood drain from my body, and my fingers turned cold as ice. Behind my back, Sterling had forged my signature and used my identity to make me the guarantor of $1 million debt. If the company went under as Vance had warned and Sterling couldn't pay the loan, that massive debt would fall entirely on me. Furthermore, in the collateral section of the contract, the address of the house we currently lived in was listed. Sterling was using the wife who had stood by him for so many years as a shield to buy a love nest for his mistress, and he was trying to snatch away even the house I had protected for so long. You've rotted this far, I whispered with a dry voice. I didn't feel a shred of sadness, only an unfathomable contempt and an almost murderous resolve that I must never forgive this man. A feeling that began to form like a black cloud deep in my chest. I took out my cell phone and holding it firmly with both hands so they wouldn't shake. I took numerous photos of the entire contract and the inside of the ledger. The records showed a raw history of how company money was fraudulently transferred and disappeared into the penthouse down payment and payments to luxury boutiques. All of this would be a powerful weapon that would undoubtedly corner Sterling later. I finished photographing all the evidence and put the contents of the drawer back exactly as they were before leaving the office. That night, just past 1:00 a.m., the sound of the front door opening abruptly echoed through the house. "Hey, Rosalind, I'm home." Sterling, reeking of alcohol, stumbled into the living room while loosening his tie. "Welcome back. I'll get you some water right now," showing not a hint of the rage I felt upon seeing the contract. I put on my usual submissive wife mask and greeted him. "Ugh, I'm exhausted. Closed another incredible deal today. Without me, that company couldn't function." Sterling dropped heavily onto the sofa, laughing arrogantly. He then downed the glass of water in one gulp and fell asleep immediately, snoring loudly. His jacket slipped sloppily toward the floor. Half of a black smartphone peeked out of his pocket. I coldly stared at Sterling's sleeping face on the sofa. In the face of this man sleeping with his mouth half open, there wasn't a trace left of the person who swore to make me happy 20 years ago. He was just an ugly middle-aged man blinded by greed. Without making a sound, I slowly slid the phone out of his pocket. Upon waking the screen, it asked for a passcode. Knowing Sterling's personality, it was impossible he had set a complex password. His favorite number, without a doubt. I typed 0825, Sterling's own birthday. The screen unlocked with extreme ease. I immediately opened his messaging app. The pinned conversation at the top was with a contact named Sloane. The profile picture was a selfie of her in that red dress. Opening the chat screen, I witnessed a series of sickeningly sweet exchanges that made me want to vomit. Sloane Sterling. The diamond ring we saw today was so pretty. I've always dreamed of one like that. Sterling. For you, I'll buy the best, Sloane, because you're my treasure. Sloane. I'm so excited. When are you going to buy it for me? Sterling. Sterling. Next month when I close a big deal at work. Keep October 15th open. I'll make a reservation at the best restaurant and give it to you there. October 15th. Seeing that date, my hand gripping the phone tightened. October 15th was the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. He was going to use our anniversary as an excuse to celebrate giving a diamond ring worth thousands to his mistress. It was surely his sleaziest calculation, using the pretext of his anniversary with his wife, so he wouldn't come home until late or even spend the night out without raising suspicions at the company or in our social circle. While scrolling the screen, I took photos of the conversations with my own phone. Promises of trips with the mistress, insults directed at me, confessions of how he cooked the company books. Everything was recorded there. Sloane, but your wife doesn't suspect anything. If she finds out you're spending all the money on me, she'll get mad, right? Sterling's response to that message surpassed my imagination in its cruelty. Sterling, don't worry, that idiot doesn't notice a thing. I have the house deed and control of everything in my power, plus all the joint savings in her account. I'm moving to my secret account next month. Sloane. Ooh, so your wife is going to be left penniless. Ha ha ha. Sterling. Who cares? I've fed her with my money for 20 years. When my mother's care situation is a bit more sorted out, I'll invent some excuse and kick her to the curb. She's just a maid. Sloane. Wait just a little longer for me. With the money from selling that house, I'll buy you a much bigger penthouse. Kicking me out penniless and starting a new life with his mistress using that money. That was Sterling's master plan for me, the woman who had supported him for 20 years and who even wiped his mother's ass. So that's what you have in mind. Well, I have my own plans too. I laughed soundlessly in the darkness of the living room. I didn't shed a single tear. I only felt a cold, knife-sharp emotion taking form inside me. At that moment, Sterling's phone screen lit up with a new message notification. It was 2:00 a.m. It was Sloane. Sloane, are you awake? So excited for October 15th. Before coming to the restaurant, make sure your wife has signed those documents we agreed on. Otherwise, I won't accept the ring. I instantly understood what those documents meant. I turned off the phone and discreetly slipped it back into Sterling's pocket. Outside, the cold autumn wind rustled the trees. The die was cast. First thing in the morning, I would have to go see a certain someone. The next morning, as always, I woke up at 5:00 and slipped out of bed without a sound. The conversation with the mistress I had seen on Sterling's phone last night, and the unbelievable contracts I found in the office, swirled in my head, but my expression in the mirror was surprisingly cold and calm. I went downstairs and started preparing breakfast for Beatrice. Low-sodium food toast and a light broth. This routine, which I had repeated without fail every single day for 20 years, was about to end. Thinking about it infused a mysterious strength into my hands as I held the knife. At 7:00 a.m., Sterling appeared in the dining room, yawning, squeezed into an expensive suit. Morning, Rosalind. I have a business dinner today, so I'll be late. Oh, and by the way, Sterling took a sip of his coffee and, looking slightly away, continued. Tonight when I get back, I need you to sign some documents. It seems that for the renewal of the company's insurance policies, they need the wet signature and ID of the spouse. Have it all ready. I gave a slight nod, my back turned to him. Sure, I understand. I'll leave it on the table for you. I laughed coldly to myself. It was obvious that this was the document Sloane had mentioned the night before. Surely a rider to make me the joint guarantor of $1 million loan or a property waiver document. Don't forget, it's a critical formality to protect my company. Sterling, convinced he had completely fooled me, walked out the door sporting a mocking smirk. A suffocating silence returned to the house. However, that silence was soon broken by the shrill sound of the call bell ringing from my mother-in-law's bedroom upstairs. Ring, ring, Rosalind. How long are you going to make me wait? I took a deep breath, placed the breakfast on a tray, and climbed the stairs. When I opened the door, Beatrice, half sitting up in bed, glared at me with a terribly sour expression. You are so slow. What kind of nerve does a simple daughter-in-law have to make her sick mother-in-law wait so long? I apologize 1,000 times, Beatrice. I'll set up your food right now. I tried to place the tray on the nightstand next to the bed. In that instant, Beatrice intentionally batted my arm away. The tray lost its balance, and the bowl of hot broth slipped crashing to the floor right at my feet with a dull thud. The boiling liquid spilled mercilessly over the tops of my feet, covered only by socks. A searing pain shot through me, but I clenched my teeth and held back my scream. Oh, what a shame. Because you're so clumsy, it spilled. Beatrice showed not the slightest sign of regret. Furthermore, she seemed amused, wearing a wicked smile. Really, you've always been useless. Since you were raised by poor parents who just owned a neighborhood grocery store, you have no manners. Not like Sterling as a respected CEO. An uneducated woman like you would never have been able to enter this family if it weren't for him. There it was again. Beatrice's habitual custom of insulting my late parents. My parents, who ran a humble mom-and-pop produce market working from sunup to sundown getting their hands dirty to raise me. Even though we struggled, they were the best people in the world and taught me to live honestly. In the past, every time she mocked them, I shed tears of frustration and bore it in silence. But the Rosalind of today was different. I began to clean the mess on the floor silently with a rag. While I was kneeling and scrubbing the floor, Beatrice looked down at me and hurled even crueler words. By the way, Sterling told me. He says he's going to sell this old house and buy me a much bigger and more beautiful penthouse with full staff included. Hearing that, my hand, which was holding the rag, stopped dead. A penthouse. That's right. And besides, a lovely girl who recently joined Sterling's company. A girl named Sloane said she wants to take care of me. The other day, she came to introduce herself and brought some very expensive gifts. She was a wonderful girl, cheerful and very well educated, unlike a gloomy daughter-in-law like you. I hope that girl soon becomes the daughter-in-law of this house. With Beatrice's words, I understood everything. Sterling and Sloane had already put my mother-in-law in their pocket. It was impossible that the young Sloane was going to wipe the ass of such a difficult and malicious old woman. Her only goal was Sterling's money and occupying the position of the CEO's wife once I was kicked out. Sterling had surely put the idea in his mother's head. If we kick Rosalind out, the young Sloane will take care of you gladly. And Beatrice, blinded by the fake smiles of a young woman who fed her ego, was complicit in the plan to throw me out of my own home. For 20 years, I had sacrificed my life to protect this house. When Sterling was on the verge of bankrupting the company, it was I who bowed my head and borrowed money from all our relatives. When Beatrice broke her hip and couldn't go to the bathroom alone, it was I who bathed her and cleaned up her feces every day, instead of Sterling, who refused to go near her, saying it smelled bad. Despite everything, these people laughed at all my sacrifices and were ready to throw me away like trash for the empty promises of a young mistress. More than anger, I felt a deep sadness, and finally, a feeling of absolute detachment. I see. So Sloane is a very kind person. Then you will be at peace, Beatrice. I answered with a voice from which I had completely suppressed any emotion. Of course. You should also start gathering your things little by little. You're mistaken if you think you're going to be able to cling to this family forever, Beatrice snorted triumphantly. I bowed silently and left my mother-in-law's room. My steps as I walked down the stairs were strangely light. I had no more doubts. There was no need to have even an ounce of pity for this family. They themselves had chosen to trample on my existence and walk the path to ruin. I returned to the kitchen, quickly took off my apron, and changed to go out. That day, I absolutely had to see someone. The only person who could unravel the web of massive debt Sterling intended to burden me with and help me prepare my counterattack. I put my cell phone with the photos of the contracts and my driver's license in my purse and opened the door. The cold autumn wind caressed my cheeks. At that moment, my cell phone's ringtone sounded faintly in the quiet residential area. An unknown number appeared on the screen. After hesitating for a moment, I answered, "Hello, this is Rosalind." Upon identifying myself, a deep nostalgic male voice resonated on the other end. "Rosalind, it's been so long." Hearing that voice, I felt the tension gripping me relax slightly. It was the first time I had spoken to him since I married Sterling 20 years ago. It was the voice of my benefactor, the man who knew my past, Harrison Caldwell, a veteran 6'8" lawyer. Mr. Harrison was a regular customer at my late parents' grocery store and had helped us tremendously with the complex estate and tax paperwork when they passed away. Since I got married and joined Sterling's family, Beatrice constantly reprimanded me that I should cut ties with acquaintances from a simple grocery store, so I had lost touch with him. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to bother you so early. I'm sorry for leaving a voicemail." "Don't worry. Hearing how distressed your voice sounded, I called you right back. You've had a problem with your husband, haven't you?" His warm concern almost made me burst into tears. To me, who for 20 years had no one to lean on and endured alone in such a cold house, his words reached my soul. "Mr. Harrison, I desperately need your advice to save my life and the company I helped build." "Understood. Come to my office immediately. I'll clear my entire day for you." An hour later, I was sitting on the sofa in Harrison's law office right in downtown Chicago. It was a sober room that smelled of books and coffee, just like before. In front of Harrison, who now had whiter hair but the same kind smile, I laid out all the photos I had taken with my phone the night before, the explicit conversations with the mistress, the bank records of the slush fund where funds were diverted, and the contract for the penthouse where my name and forged signature appeared as a guarantor. As Harrison reviewed the documents, his expression hardened. "Just how stupid has your husband become?" Harrison let out a deep sigh, his eyes flashing behind his glasses. "Rosalind, this is not a simple case of infidelity. Stealing your identity and your DocuSign credentials to make you a guarantor is outright forgery and fraud. And if he's also diverting company funds to another account, it's a crime of corporate embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. He is setting a terrible trap for you. I know. Tonight my husband intends to make me sign the final document for that debt, or something similar, lying to me and saying it's to renew the company's insurance policies." I told him about Sterling's strange attitude that morning. Harrison crossed his arms, thought for a moment, and pulled a small black device from his desk drawer. It was a hidden voice recorder. "Listen to me, Rosalind. Tonight when Sterling brings, the documents do not refuse to sign. But if I do that, I'll take on the debt. Relax. Before signing, make sure you turn on this recorder. Ask him clearly. These are the company insurance documents, right?" You have to record his voice nodding and lying to force you to sign. A contract signed under fraudulent pretenses is null and void. Furthermore, first thing tomorrow morning, you will go to a notary and the administration to revoke your digital signature credentials and request new ones. We will send a certified legal injunction to the bank immediately notifying them that the guarantor contract is void due to fraud. That way, Sterling's plan will collapse entirely. Harrison's precise instructions completely cleared the fog of anxiety covering my heart. "Mr. Harrison, thank you so much. I had been alone for so long, not knowing what to do. You were always a very strong girl, Rosalind. I know that when you lost your parents, you didn't complain and swallow dirt to help your husband's company. Enough is enough. You don't have to keep being the victim of those people. I will help you with all my might to get your life back." At those words, I cried openly for the first time in 20 years. The tears I hadn't shed, no matter how many humiliations I suffered in my in-laws' house, flowed as if a dam had broken. That night, past 10:00 p.m., Sterling returned home. "Hey, Rosalind, I brought the papers I told you about this morning. Do you have your ID handy?" Sterling tossed his suit jacket and placed a sheet of paper on the table, visibly excited. I discreetly slipped my hand into my apron pocket, pressed the record button on the device Mr. Harrison had lent me, and approached the table. The top half of the document was intentionally covered with brochures from another company. Only the bottom signature section was visible. "Honey, it's so late. These are the documents to renew the company's insurance that you told me about this morning, right?" I asked, pretending to be the usual ignorant wife. Sterling averted his gaze for a second, but immediately nodded with a mocking smile. "Yeah, sure. It's an insurance policy, so you and my mother won't face hardships if something happens to me. As the CEO's wife, I need your wet signature here. The clauses are very complicated, so you just sign here." Silently sharpening my resolve, I took the pen. I understand. How thoughtful of you to think of me so much. I signed my name smoothly. Perfect. That does it. Sterling snatched the document away as if he had obtained a treasure and smiled with satisfaction. I'm going to take a shower. I'll be in a bit late tomorrow. Watching my husband head to the bathroom with a spring in his step, I turned off the recorder in my apron. With this, the first trap was set. The moment he tried to buy the penthouse for his mistress, the bank's review would freeze and he would fall into despair. But my battle didn't end here. I sat on the living room sofa and opened a brown envelope that Mr. Harrison had handed me when we said goodbye. Rosalind, about the records of that slush fund Sterling has. There's something that worries me. I've used my contacts to investigate the background a bit. The lawyer's words echoed in my ears. Inside the envelope were a couple of investigation reports. I looked down at the documents and started reading. The next instant, I doubted my own eyes and held my breath. I believed that slush fund was where Sterling was slowly accumulating the company money he embezzled to maintain his life with his mistress. However, the origin of that money was far more terrifying than I imagined. That enormous capital that had entered the off-the-books account wasn't company profits. Sterling had mortgaged vital real estate lots and commercial warehouses belonging to the company properties we had acquired with so much effort when we were young, to take out loans with predatory interest rates from shady private lenders. The company's finances were already in the red. What Sterling said about them posting record profits was an absolute lie. The reality is that Vance and the other executives were juggling fire to keep the company afloat by the skin of their teeth. And yet, instead of saving the company, Sterling was devouring the remaining assets to go into debt to keep his mistress. And in another report, the hidden face of the mistress Sloane, the sweet 32-year-old receptionist, was detailed. Sterling believed she was a pure angel who adored him. But her past was stained black. Sloane had already destroyed the marriages of 2 other older show-off businessmen using the exact same method. She played to the man's ego, made him buy luxury condos and jewelry, squeezed him to the limit of his assets, and right before the company went bankrupt, she sold everything and vanished like smoke. She was, in short, a professional gold digger hunting middle-aged men. Sterling thought he was a powerful man, capable of keeping a young woman. But in reality, he had fallen right into Sloane's sweet trap and was just going to be devoured to the bone like stupid prey. What an idiotic man, I murmured softly in the empty living room, trembling as I held the report. More than anger, I was overcome by disgust and dismay. The true nature of the man I had supported for 20 years was that of a despicable creature, capable of using his company and his family as shields to go into debt just to keep up appearances. If I hadn't noticed, and the guarantor document I signed last night had been accepted when Sloane abandoned him and he declared bankruptcy, that colossal debt would have fallen entirely on me. The next morning, when I took breakfast to Beatrice's room, as usual, she was in an excellent mood watching her horoscope on TV. Rosalind Sterling told me yesterday, next month, the paperwork for the new penthouse will be finished. There will be a huge guest room there. And a new girl will come to take care of me. Beatrice spoke with an exaggeratedly cheerful tone, purposely trying to mortify me. Oh, really? How exciting, right? When I answered without showing any emotion, Beatrice snorted in disgust. Really, no matter how much time passes, you're still completely humorless. When the new girl comes, we'll finally say goodbye to a daughter-in-law as bland as you. I'll finally have a life worthy of Sterling's family. My mother-in-law, who had lived, giving importance only to appearances and what people said. If Sterling had become a show-off, it was probably due to the abnormal pride of this mother. Beatrice didn't know she was about to become the victim of $1 million debt and lose her home, nor that her son was about to ruin the company deceived by a young woman. She only dreamed happily of her future in a luxury apartment being adored by a younger woman. Yes, Beatrice. I'm sure that by this time next month, everything will have changed completely. I bowed silently and left the room. During the morning, I set things into motion. First, I went to renew my digital credentials and to the notary to revoke any power of attorney. Then I went to Harrison's office, and we drafted the formal legal documents to nullify the penthouse contract. A certified cease and desist, a notification with full legal validity. If we sent this to the bank and the real estate agency, the guarantor contract I signed last night would become worthless paper. The loan process would stop completely. My preparations were proceeding perfectly, but my peace of mind was short-lived. Just past 3:00 p.m. while I was cleaning the house, my cell phone vibrated in my apron pocket. The name Vance, the company executive, appeared on the screen. Yes, Vance. What's wrong? When I answered, Vance's voice sounded agitated and breathless. Rosalind, it's terribly. The CEO suddenly tried to wire all the remaining cash in the company's main operating account to a shell account, and he's also started demanding advance payments from our oldest clients for this very month. I held my breath. Sterling wasn't just trying to take the money for the penthouse down payment or gifts for the mistress. He intended to take the last of the company's operating funds to run away with Sloan. Rosalind, if the boss takes that money, we won't even be able to pay the employees' salaries next month. The company will definitely go under. On the other end of the line, I heard Vance's groan of frustration. For someone who had trusted Sterling and supported the company for 20 years, it was too cruel a betrayal. Vance, calm down. I was surprised at how cold and calm my own voice sounded. When is the transfer he's trying to make scheduled for October 16th? Next Tuesday, we will receive a large deposit from a contract, and he plans to move it directly to the other account. October 16th. He planned to give the ring to Sloan on October 15th, the day of our anniversary at the luxury restaurant, and the next day flee with all the company's money. All the dots connected into a single line. Understood, Vance. I will stop him. Please gather the rest of the executives and prepare the evidence of the CEO's fraud. I swear I won't let you end up on the street. Rosalind, we trust you. Everything would end the night of October 15th. I hung up the phone and looked at the calendar. There was only a week left. That night, when they raised their wine glasses laughing at me, I would prepare the grandest stage for them. I picked up my cell phone and searched for a number. It was the number for Julian, the owner of the small, long-standing jewelry shop, the store where Sterling had ordered the diamond ring for Sloan. Hi, Julian. It's Rosalind. It's been a while. Listen, I'm calling to ask you a small favor regarding the ring my husband ordered. I lowered my voice so no one would hear me and slowly outlined my plan. Hearing my words, Julian held his breath for an instant. My husband didn't know it yet. The curse I was going to engrave on that beautiful ring he planned to give his mistress. Sign here. I can't stand living with a woman as boring as you anymore. It happened as I was finishing cleaning up after dinner and drying my hands in the kitchen. Sterling violently threw a paper onto the living room table. It was an uncontested divorce settlement agreement, and Sterling's information was already completely filled out. What does this mean? I asked in a low voice. Sterling crossed his arms and shot me a cold, contemptuous glare. I'm sure you suspected it already. There's a woman I truly love. Next month, I'm moving in with her to a highly secured luxury penthouse. So it ends today. There wasn't a trace of guilt in his attitude. His voice was freezing, as if he were throwing out an old appliance. Then Beatrice, who was watching television on the sofa, chimed in joyfully. Rosalind, finally, Sterling told me yesterday. Next month, when the paperwork for the penthouse is done, our new young daughter-in-law is coming to take care of me. Sign quickly, and get out once and for all. Beatrice didn't care in the slightest that I was losing the place where I lived. She was only intoxicated by the fantasy of a young daughter-in-law coming to flatter her. And there are conditions, Sterling pointed his finger at me, adopting an intimidating posture. There will be no division of assets or alimony. I earned this house and the money in the accounts working as CEO. You've spent over 15 years not working, slacking off at home and caring for my mother. I'm not giving my money to a kept housewife. I'll transfer $6,000 to your account for you to get lost. That's more than enough for you. Hearing those words, I almost felt dizzy. When the company was about to go bankrupt, who contributed all her savings? When my mother-in-law broke her hip and was bedridden, who sacrificed all her time to care for her 24 hours a day, taking her to rehab and cleaning her? Sterling had completely erased from his head the fact that he was able to work freely because I protected the home. You're asking me to leave this house for $6,000? Yeah, exactly. But listen closely, Sterling spat out even more unbelievable words. The key handover for the new penthouse will be early next month. Until then, you will come every day from whatever cheap rental you find to this house, and you will handle the meals and my mother's care just like always. Sloan will be very busy preparing the furniture for the new place. It's the least you can do to repay me for feeding you for 20 years. His selfishness knew no bounds. While they dreamed of a luxury life in their new home, they intended to exploit me as a free caregiver whom they had just discarded. That's right, we're not going to make the new girl clean my intimate things, Beatrice laughed triumphantly. My blood boiled with rage. I wanted to tear that paper to shreds and throw it in his face right now, but I took a deep breath and clenched my fists inside my apron pockets. I shouldn't let my emotions take over. I remembered Harrison's words. Wait until they were completely confident and all their escape routes were closed. I had to play the role of the submissive, pathetic wife. I understand. Thank you for all this time. Repressing all my emotions, I picked up the pen from the table. I signed my name in the corresponding box on the agreement. Perfect. Sterling let out a shout of joy, seeing that I had signed without resisting. He probably thought, in the end, she's a useless woman who can't say anything when I'm not around. And while we're at it, leave the bank ledger and the debit card you use to manage household expenses right here. Starting today, I'll manage it. I don't want you taking money without permission. Okay. I took out the ledger for the joint household account and handed it to him without a word of protest. Good that you're so docile. I'm going to take a bath. Start looking for a cheap apartment tomorrow. Sterling went to the bathroom humming, hugging the divorce agreement and the bank ledger as if they were a treasure. Beatrice also nodded, satisfied, and retired to her room. Alone in the dark living room, I smiled coldly. Sterling was convinced he had won completely, but there was one thing he didn't know. That very morning, when I renewed my digital credentials, I had already filed a contested divorce lawsuit in court, which would completely paralyze any attempt to process his uncontested agreement. When he took that piece of paper in, they would hand it back to him saying it was worthless. And regarding the savings ledger he snatched with such pride, the tens of thousands of dollars in there had already been transferred in their entirety to a secret account in my name as part of my legitimate division of assets under Harrison's legal counsel. If Sterling tried to withdraw money tomorrow, he would see that only a few cents remained. I will not let you get away with anything. At that moment, my cell phone, which I had left on the table, vibrated briefly. It was an email from the private investigator I had hired. It had a photo attached. In the photo appeared Sterling's mistress, Sloane. But the man walking beside her wasn't Sterling. It was an older man dressed in a very expensive designer suit. Sloane wore the same sickeningly sweet smile she gave Sterling, clinging to that man's arm as they walked into a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. The detective's message read, "Sloane has already contacted her next target. It seems she sensed Sterling's company is in danger and has started securing her escape route." I let out a small chuckle in the middle of the darkness. "Sterling, you plan to throw me in the trash to choose your mistress, but your mistress is already preparing to throw you away." Sterling's company was in flames, and he kept racking up debts, guaranteed by company assets. Even though he thought he was hiding it well, Sloane, a professional at squeezing older men, had already noticed the danger. Her plan was to extract all the money she could from Sterling's sinking ship, and before the company went completely bankrupt, jump to her next rich prey. The next morning, Sterling left for the office in a very good mood. Since I obediently signed the night before and handed over the account, he believed he had absolute control of the situation. He was convinced he was going to submit that agreement to the court to validate it, unaware it was going to be thrown out. After he left, I checked the pockets of his suit before taking it to the dry cleaner. A crumpled paper peeked out from the inside pocket. It wasn't a restaurant receipt. It was a receipt from a high-end luxury consignment store in the Gold Coast. Purchase amount $10, 0 inches cash. Item ladies' designer handbag. The date was from just 3 days ago, and the client name clearly read Sloane. Seeing the item, a cold laugh escaped me. It exactly matched the bag Sterling had bragged about buying her for her birthday in the messages I read. Sterling embezzled company funds to buy her expensive gifts, but she, while telling him, "It's too beautiful to use, I'll keep it as a treasure," went running to a secondhand shop to sell it for cash for her getaway. I didn't know why that receipt was in Sterling's pocket. Maybe it fell out of Sloane's purse, and Sterling pocketed it without looking. In any case, it was another perfect piece of evidence of Sloane's true nature. I smoothed out the paper and carefully filed it in a folder. At 10:00 a.m., the house landline started ringing loudly. When I answered, Sterling's screams pierced my ear. "Rosalind, what is the meaning of this? What do you mean?" I answered calmly. Sterling raised his voice even more. "Don't play dumb. The expense account you gave me yesterday. I went to the ATM to check the balance, and there are only a few cents left. Where are the tens of thousands of dollars we had saved?" Imagining my husband's red face of rage in front of the ATM, I smiled silently. "Oh, that money. I transferred it to my personal account yesterday." "What? Are you kidding me? I earned that money. You stole it without permission. I'm going to report you to the police for theft." Faced with Sterling's ridiculous threats, I replied without flinching in the slightest. "You can go to the police or wherever you want. Yesterday you told me there was going to be no division of assets, right?" "Yeah." I said, "A kept woman like you has no right to anything. That's why I only moved what belongs to me." The money in that account was the sum of the $25,000 I had saved before we got married and what I saved working at the grocery store those first few years. The money you earned has disappeared into your company's expenses and your private parties. If you look at the ledger history, you'll see clearly that they are my premarital assets. I've already consulted with my lawyer. Lawyer Sterling's voice shrank for an instant, but his usual arrogance quickly resurfaced. Bah, I'm sure some cheap public defender filled your head with nonsense and you think you're so smart. I don't care. Keep that chump change. Next week, hundreds of thousands of dollars will hit my company account. And besides today, my penthouse mortgage will be approved. Enjoy your misery in some crappy dump with that chump change. Sterling spat those words at me and slammed the phone down. Poor man. He still hadn't realized he was standing on the edge of the abyss. The penthouse mortgage he was so confident in had already been blocked by the bank thanks to the certified letter I sent yesterday revoking my guarantee. And regarding the company revenues he planned to flee with, I had also taken measures. My cell phone vibrated in my apron. It was a message from Vance. Rosalind, I just reached an agreement with all the board executives. We now have all the evidence of the CEO's mismanagement and embezzlement. To prevent him from withdrawing the money coming in next week, we've used our powers as the executive board to divert those receivables to a secure company lockbox account. Thank you, Vance. This is all thanks to you guys, I replied briefly. With this, all of Sterling's escape routes were completely closed. He couldn't get the mortgage. He couldn't take the company's money. His divorce agreement wouldn't be accepted. And his mistress, to whom he had given everything, would disappear in an instant when she found out he was ruined. The man who had treated me like a maid for 20 years, who had insulted my parents and trampled on my life. The sandcastle he had built was about to collapse. Only a little bit left. Rosalind, come here for a moment. I heard Beatrice's shrill voice from the second floor. When I went up to her room, I found Beatrice sitting in her wheelchair, pulling old clothes and dresses out of the closet and throwing them on the floor. What's wrong, Beatrice? Why are you making a mess? I'm not making a mess. I'm getting rid of the old. In the luxury penthouse we're moving to next month. These old clothes that smell like a closet won't fit in. Sloane promised she's going to buy me very expensive clothes that match the new house. Beatrice spoke to me as if she were a little girl daydreaming, telling me her fantasies just to make me jealous. You should also be packing your things. Living in such a nice house has always been too much for you. Starting next month, you'll return to the poor life you belong to. Toward this mother-in-law, capable of being so cruel to the daughter-in-law who had been caring for her tirelessly, I no longer felt even anger. Only an abyssal pity. She blindly believed her son was a brilliant CEO. She was convinced a young mistress would care for her affectionately. When all those illusions shattered, what face would this proud old woman make? Yes, Beatrice, don't worry. I am also preparing my things little by little. I answered her with the most serene smile I had ever given her, and began to carefully fold the clothes scattered on the floor. In the afternoon, autumn days were short, and outside the window, it was already starting to get dark. At that moment, my cell phone rang. It was Julian, the jewelry shop owner. I went into my room so Beatrice wouldn't hear me and closed the door. Tell me, Julian. Rosalind, the ring you asked for is ready. Julian's voice sounded somewhat shaky and bewildered. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for asking you for something so strange. Don't worry. Thinking about everything you've suffered, this is the least I could do. Are you sure you want me to put that exact phrase? Yes. It is the first and the last truth I am going to gift that man. I hung up the phone and closed my eyes in silence. I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. October 14th. Tomorrow finally would be October 15th, our 20th anniversary. The night my husband would give a diamond ring to his mistress and intend to strip away my entire life. I gently stroked the number 15 on the calendar. The stage was set. Let's go, Sterling. I'll watch you from the best seat during your grand moment of glory. The morning of our 20th wedding anniversary arrived. A high, clear autumn sky without a single cloud. However, inside the house there wasn't the slightest hint of celebration. I have a business dinner today. I might close a massive deal. I'll be late, so don't save me any dinner and go to bed early. Sterling told me this while meticulously styling his hair in front of the bathroom mirror. He was wearing a loud designer tie that Sloane had surely picked out. All right, have a great time. Good luck with work. I saw him off with the same calm voice as always. While putting on his shoes in the entryway, Sterling turned toward me and flashed a mocking smile. Before going to the office, I'll swing by the courthouse to submit the divorce agreement you signed yesterday. So, starting today, you're just a guest in this house. Until we move next month, you better take good care of my mother, like the maid you are. He was totally convinced his perfect plan had worked. Yes, be careful on your way. I bowed my head silently. Sterling snorted with satisfaction and opened the door energetically. After he left, I went up to my mother-in-law's room. Beatrice was already awake, watching TV from bed in a very good mood. I brought you breakfast, Beatrice. Today I prepared your favorite baked lemon pepper tilapia. Oh, how nice. Although, well, Rosalind, putting up with these bland breakfasts won't be for much longer. Beatrice said, looking at the tray sideways with joy. Sterling told me he was going to the courthouse today. With this, finally, that wonderful Sloane will be the daughter-in-law of this house. When we move to the penthouse next month, she promised she'll make me breakfasts like a luxury hotel every morning. I'll finally be able to say goodbye to your poor girl food. Beatrice's head was full of happy fantasies about the young mistress. I smiled silently. That's right. I'm sure a wonderful life awaits you. I said that and left the room. That was the last breakfast I prepared for my mother-in-law in that house. Going down to the first floor, I rolled up my sleeves and began to clean the house. Thoroughly. I vacuumed, cleaned the windows, scrubbed the hardwood floors with a damp mop. This house that I had protected crawling on the floors every day for 20 years. I remembered the joy we felt when we moved here from that small apartment, and how we picked out the living room curtains together. But without realizing it, this house had become an icy prison, keeping me locked up. Even so, I held no grudge against the house. Because the nights I cried, this house was the only thing that embraced me in silence. Thank you for everything, I murmured while caressing the shiny floor I had just polished. To finish, I went to the small corner where we kept the photos of our deceased loved ones and lit some incense. I brought my hands together, bidding farewell to Sterling's family and promising to start my new life. My job as a wife was over. At 2:00 p.m., while resting in the living room, my phone rang. It was Vance. Rosalind, is it a good time to talk? Vance's voice mixed excitement and relief. Yes, no problem. What happened at the company? Everything went according to plan. A little while ago, the CEO tried to wire a large sum from the main account to another account right from his office. But since we had already notified the bank that there were suspicions of fraud by the administrator, the transfer was blocked by a system error. I sighed in relief. With this, the employees' salaries and the vital funds of the company were safe from the mistress's clutches. What did Sterling say? When he saw the error, he started screaming that the bank system was garbage and that we were all useless. Normally, he would call the bank immediately, but since he has very important plans today, he said he'd deal with that nonsense tomorrow and rushed out of the office. Sterling was so focused on delivering the ring that he couldn't think of anything else. He didn't realize the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. Also, Rosalind, the bank, called this morning asking for the CEO. They informed us that after receiving a legal injunction from his wife, the guarantor contract was annulled, so they will not grant him the mortgage for the penthouse. I took the call and obviously haven't told the boss. Thank you, Vance. With this, all his plans are destroyed. Rosalind, are you sure this is for the best? Yes. Tonight I will put an end to everything. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. At 4:00 p.m., I went to my room and pulled a black dress from the back of the closet that I hadn't worn in years. I took off the worn apron, applied a little makeup, and elegantly tied my hair back. Then I put on a wide-brimmed black hat that covered half my face and draped an elegant shawl over my shoulders. Looking in the mirror, the exhausted daughter-in-law caring for her mother-in-law was no longer there. The strong Rosalind, capable of handling an entire company's accounting and facing any problem, had returned. I put the recorder, the investigator's reports, the infidelity photos, and my new bank ledger in my purse. Finally, I left an envelope on the living room table. Inside was the court notification informing him that the uncontested divorce agreement Sterling had tried to submit today had been rejected because I had previously filed a contested divorce lawsuit. Goodbye. I gave a small bow to the house immersed in silence and locked the door. I dropped the key through the mail slot. I would never open that door again. I got into a taxi and gave the destination. The streets of Chicago at sunset passed by the window. 20 years ago, when we were poor, we promised each other that someday we would eat something delicious in a city as beautiful as this. Sterling's shy but sincere smile when he gave me that cheap silver ring. All of it seemed like a distant lie. I no longer knew if he had changed or if he was always that kind of man. The only certainty was that today I would take my life back. At 6:30 p.m., I arrived at the entrance of an exclusive French restaurant in one of Chicago's finest areas. Giving the name for the reservation, the host greeted me with extreme courtesy and guided me to a table in the back. Will your companion be arriving later? I'm alone today. I want to enjoy dinner quietly. As you wish. The table I was assigned was in an excellent spot where I could see the whole dining room under dim light. I ordered hot Earl Grey tea and closed my eyes silently without taking off my hat. The live piano music resonated elegantly. The clock struck 7:00 p.m. At that moment, the heavy glass door opened and a couple walked in. Sterling wearing an extremely expensive suit with a firm and confident step, and by his side, glued to his arm, Sloane. in her flashy red dress, handing out sickeningly sweet smiles. They headed toward a table, the table I had casually asked to be seated right next to. I smiled slowly under my hat. Sterling, I'm sure right now you think you're the luckiest man in the world. With the company money in your power, throwing out your wife and planning to live in a luxury penthouse with your new mistress, do you think your perfect plan is sailing smoothly? Come on, let the protagonists enter. I lifted my teacup gently. It wouldn't be long before the waiter brought the desserts, and you pulled out the little ring box with a triumphant air. From this front row seat, I will savor the exact moment you fall into the void. Under the dim light of the restaurant, the candle flames flickered softly over the tables. Inside, only the sound of the piano and the clinking of glasses could be heard. At the adjacent table, barely a foot away, Sterling and Sloane sat down. I pulled the brim of my hat down a bit more and covered my face with the shawl, pretending to look at the night cityscape through the window. Since they were sitting with their backs to me, they didn't seem to have noticed me at all. To them, my existence wasn't even 3 feet away. Sterling, what an incredible restaurant, bringing me to such a special place. I'm so happy, Sloane said in her shrill voice. Of course, Sloane. Today is going to be a very special day for us. You deserve this and more. Sterling smiled, believing himself the protagonist of a movie. The waiter approached and poured an exquisite champagne. Sterling toasted loudly. To our new life and to your beauty. Cheers, cheers. The crystalline sound of the clinking glasses resonated. I took a sip of my tea. The bitterness sharpened my senses even more. Hey, Sterling, are the divorce papers sorted out? Yeah, perfectly. First thing this morning, I submitted the agreement to the court. That idiot signed it last night without suspecting a thing. With this, I've finally cut all ties with that boring, depressing woman. Sterling puffed out his chest with pride. She's probably looking for some cheap, dumpy apartment with the measly $6,000 I gave her. It's the ending that awaits a simple, useless housewife who doesn't know how to do anything without me. From his mouth only came insults toward me. He treated the woman who had worked for free for his company, who had secured money when it almost went bankrupt, and who cared for his mother as useless. A long time ago, those words would have shattered my heart, but now I felt only a cold silence. He didn't know that the paper he had handed in at the courthouse was worthless because I had filed for a contested divorce. He kept talking about his fake victory. Really, you are incredible, Sterling. Then we'll finally be free. Sloane grabbed his hand with shining eyes. But did they approve the mortgage for the new penthouse? And that company money you told me about? If you don't get it, I'm really scared. In Sloane's words, her undeniable obsession with money peeked through. She knew Sterling's company was in flames, which is why she wanted to squeeze out every last cent in cash, the penthouse and the jewelry before it sank. As I saw in the investigator's photo, she already had another target in her sights. Sterling was just her latest wallet. Don't worry. Who do you think I am? I'm the CEO. Sterling responded with an arrogant smile. I'm sure the bank already approved the penthouse mortgage today. Tomorrow I'll sign the official contract. And about the company money, no problem. Today there was a computer glitch and the transfer was delayed, but tomorrow hundreds of thousands of dollars will hit my personal account. I'll give you a life full of luxury, I promise. Oh, Sterling, I love you so much. Sloane leaned toward him joyfully. What a pathetic scene. The mortgage had been denied due to my injunction. The company funds had been blocked and secured by the executives. The brilliant future Sterling bragged about had already been completely destroyed by my own hands. And the two of them, oblivious to everything, kept talking about sweet dreams of grandeur. But Sterling, what will happen with Beatrice? You said there would be a guest room, but I can't take care of her, okay? It would ruin my nails. She pouted. That was her true face, very different from the girl who played nice, promising to care for her. Oh, don't worry about that, Sterling spoke with total coldness. I'm going to make Rosalind take care of her for a while. I'll have her come every day from her dump to work like a mule until right before we move. And on moving day itself, I'll dump my mother in that cheap nursing home I found. I'd have to be crazy to bring that crippled old bat to our new love nest. Seriously. Your mom seemed to trust you so much. Whatever. Whoever gets in the way of my life, be it my wife or my mother, I simply cut them off at the root. I prioritize my own happiness. I squeezed my teacup tightly. To satisfy his ego, he was going to throw the woman who had dedicated 20 years to him out on the street with no money. And in the end, he intended to throw his own mother, who adored him, into a cheap nursing home like she was garbage. Beatrice must be at home waiting anxiously for Sterling's return, convinced that her young daughter-in-law was going to treat her like a queen in a luxury penthouse. Sterling's true selfish nature was rotten to the core. With this, any minimal doubt I had left vanished completely. He didn't deserve a single drop of pity. The tasting menu dishes were served and cleared. Sterling drank wine and didn't stop bragging about how fantastic his company was and how capable he was. Sloane nodded from time to time, but she kept glancing sideways toward the restaurant entrance or at her own phone. It was clear that her heart had already moved on from Sterling and was aiming at her next prey. Even so, Sterling was intoxicated by that fake smile. "It's about time," Sterling murmured, looking at his watch. He gave the waiter a signal with his eyes. With that signal, the restaurant's piano music changed to a slightly more upbeat melody. I narrowed my eyes under the hat. The time had come. The waiter approached their table and set down a dessert plate with an elaborate caramel decoration. Wow, how gorgeous! Sloane let out a cry of joy that was far too exaggerated. In the center of the plate were scattered red rose petals, and next to them a small black velvet box. Sterling blushed a little, put on a smile, brimming with confidence, and picked up the box. "Sloane, we've only known each other a short time, but I feel reborn with you. I want you to accept this." I reached into my purse and turned on the voice recorder. Sterling slowly opened the box. The diamond inside flashed with blinding light. It was a top-tier ring that had cost him tens of thousands by cooking the company's books. "I can't believe it." Sloane played her part perfectly, covering her mouth and trembling with joy, her eyes watery. "Go on, put it on." Sloane put the ring on her left ring finger with shaking hands. "It fits perfectly. It feels like a dream." "Do I really deserve to be this happy?" "Of course. You are my most important person." Watching this sickeningly sweet scene, I took a deep breath. Sloane looked at her finger over and over again, happy. And then, as if wanting to check something, she took the ring off, held it up to the light, and peered inside. "Hey, Sterling, it looks like there's something engraved inside the ring. The letters are so small, I can't really read them." I had been waiting for this moment. Sterling still didn't know. Inside that ring, there was no phrase of love. What was engraved was the phrase I had asked the jeweler to inscribe, to throw them into the depths of hell. When Sloane narrowed her eyes and began to slowly read, the atmosphere froze. A clear metallic sound echoed in the silent restaurant. "Saint Sterling, what is this?" Sloane's lips trembled uncontrollably. The sweet, seductive look she had been giving Sterling had vanished entirely. Now she looked at the ring that had rolled onto the table as if she had seen a ghost. "Sloane, what's wrong? Is there a problem with the engraving?" Sterling frowned, bewildered by his mistress's sudden change in attitude. Apparently due to his aging eyesight, he couldn't immediately make out what was written inside the small ring on the table. "Sterling, what does this mean? Is this some sick joke?" Sloane shouted in a panic. Patrons at nearby tables turned to look at what was happening. "Joke? What are you talking about? I just wanted to make you happy." I stood up slowly, took off the black hat I was wearing, and pulled the shawl, hiding my face down from my shoulders. My heels clicked silently as I approached their table. "If you drop the ring like that, it'll get scratched, and then the price will drop when you take it to the pawn shop." My serene, cold voice fell over them. Sterling and Sloane looked up at me at the same time as if they had been struck by lightning. Rosalind Sterling opened his eyes wide and moved his mouth like a fish out of water. I saw the blood drain from his face in an instant. "Good evening, Sterling. And nice to meet you, Miss Sloane." I flashed a perfect smile and nodded slightly. "What are you doing here? Have you been following me, you stalker, Sterling?" Coming to his senses, yelled at me with a red face, uncaring of the stares from the crowd. "Don't say such ugly things like stalker." Today is October 15th, the day of our 20th wedding anniversary. If my husband is toasting in such a wonderful restaurant, it is only natural that his wife accompanies him, don't you think? Without asking anyone's permission, I pulled out one of the empty chairs and sat calmly across from them. "Don't spout nonsense. You and I are finished. This morning I submitted the divorce agreement. Get out of here right now." Sterling slammed his fist on the table and tried to stand up. "About the divorce. It wasn't accepted." I pulled a document from my purse and slid it across the table. Sterling froze. "What are you saying?" "Before you submitted it, I had already filed a contested divorce lawsuit at the courthouse. Legally, we are still husband and wife." "So what? How long do you plan on bothering me?" Just as Sterling raised his hand as if to strike me, I looked at him coldly and continued talking. "The one who is bothering someone is you. You used my name and my DocuSign credentials without permission to list me as a guarantor for a penthouse. That is very serious document fraud." Sterling's raised hand hung frozen in the air. I had touched the truth he most wanted to hide. A cold sweat began to break out on his forehead. "Through my lawyer, I have already sent a legal injunction to the bank and the real estate agency. Your penthouse mortgage has been completely halted." "Liar, I am the CEO. The bank can't deny me a loan." "And that's not all." I slapped another document in his face. about the money you were going to wire from the company's main account to another account. The executives led by Vance have already spoken with the bank and blocked the funds. Tomorrow, not a single dollar will enter your personal account. The money you used to keep your mistress in fake solvency was money from predatory loans using company assets as collateral. The company is about to go bankrupt. Sterling's face went from red to blue and then to an ashen gray. Vance betrayed me, my company. He slumped in the chair, grabbing his head. Next to him, Sloane, who had been listening to our conversation, jumped up. Hey, wait a minute, Sterling. What does this mean that the company is going bankrupt? That you can't buy the penthouse? Sloane's voice cracked. To her, who had only gotten close for the money, the fact that Sterling had suddenly become a debt-ridden old man was the worst of unforeseen events. I have nothing to do with this. Sterling approached me on his own. I'm going home. Sloane grabbed her designer bag from the table and turned to flee. Just a moment, miss. Sloane. My calm but firm voice stopped her dead in her tracks. I have a gift for you from me. I pulled a small envelope from my purse and offered it to her. What is this? Sloane opened the envelope with trembling hands. From inside, photos and a slip of paper fell onto the table. The photos showed Sloane clinging to the arm of another older man walking into a luxury hotel. And the paper was the receipt from the high-end consignment store in the Gold Coast where she had pawned the bag Sterling gave her. Ah. As soon as Sloane saw it, she let out a choked gasp and covered her face with her hands. As soon as you knew Sterling's company was in danger, you had already found your next target. You planned to accept the ring today before he went completely bankrupt and run away, right? Hearing my words, Sterling snapped his head up. Sloane, what does this mean? You said you loved me. Don't touch me, you starving beggar. Sloane swatted Sterling's hand away as if she were seeing something disgusting. A fake show-off old man like you with no money is worthless. Your wife figured everything out and you ruined your company. You're pathetic. The nasty insults from both of them echoed throughout the luxury restaurant. The man who had looked down on me for 20 years was now being trampled on and despised as someone utterly worthless by the mistress to whom he had given everything. That scene was the perfect beginning to my revenge. Wait, Sloane, wait! Sterling tried to cling to her. Stop! I pointed to the ring with the brilliant diamond that had been forgotten on the table. You still haven't seen what is written inside that ring you bought by embezzling money from your own company, have you? At my icy voice, Sterling looked startled at the ring on the table. Rosalind, what did you do to this ring? Sterling picked it up with trembling fingers, narrowed his eyes, and looked at the engraving inside. He still didn't know that the words carved into that little piece of metal would shatter his pride and his life into 1,000 pieces. Under the dim light, there were small English letters, smaller than a grain of rice, but clearly legible, purchased with embezzled funds, $1.5 million in debt. Reading those words, the last drop of blood left Sterling's face. His lips began to tremble. What is this? Why does it say this here? The ring slipped from his hands and rolled across the table again. The diamond, supposedly worth tens of thousands, now emitted a cold light as if it were a stone reflecting his own crimes. Are you surprised? I set my teacup on the saucer gently and stared at him. The owner of the jewelry store where you ordered the ring is an old friend of my late parents. He's the one who made us those cheap silver rings we bought when we got married. Sterling held his breath, dumbfounded. He called me. He told me you had come in with a young girl to buy a very expensive ring, and that on top of it you were trying to pay for it with company funds. So I asked him for a favor. I asked him that right before you picked it up, he engraved that truth on the inside. Rosalind, how could you? It was the easiest way to show Miss Sloane what kind of man you truly are. I turned my gaze to Sloane, who was pale and speechless. Miss Sloane, you believed this man was a rich and respectable CEO, but I'm afraid it was all a facade. His company is ruined. The designer bags, the dinners in hotels, and this ring. He bought it all by taking out predatory loans and putting his own company's assets up as collateral. It amounts to a debt of $1.5 million. Sloane let out a scream and took a step back, trembling from head to toe. I didn't know. No one told me anything about debts. I have nothing to do with this. She looked at Sterling with disgust. She grabbed her bag again and tried to flee. Of course you have something to do with it. My cold voice pinned her to the floor. All the gifts and money you've received from him come from embezzled company funds. I've already set the executives and my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, into motion. Tomorrow you will receive a legal notice demanding the full return of the stolen money in addition to a lawsuit for damages due to the affair. Don't think you can escape. And regarding that older gentleman from the hotel, you've got your eye on. I already have an investigator tracking him. If you try to hide, I will send all the proof of this affair and embezzlement to that man. Sound good? Sloane's knees gave out and she collapsed to the floor. Leave me alone. I just wanted to live the high life. Why is this happening to me? She covered her face with her hands and began crying loudly like a little girl. At that moment, there was no trace left of the woman who had called me useless and toasted with champagne triumphantly. It was a pathetic ending. Sloane, are you going to betray me? Sterling yelled at Sloane, who was sitting on the floor. But Sloane, crying, screamed back, "This is all your fault. If you weren't a debt-ridden liar, none of this would have happened." The restaurant plunged into a dead silence, and the waiters and patrons watched the pitiful scene from a distance. The prestige and appearances that Sterling valued most were crumbling spectacularly in public. Sterling, breathing heavily, turned to me. His eyes swam in panic and despair. The company funds blocked the penthouse dream, vanished his mistress, insulting him and a massive debt of $1.5 million as his only company. Suddenly, he rested his hands on the table and bowed his head toward me. "Rosalind, forgive me. I was wrong. It was all this woman's fault. She seduced me. I was deceived. The man who just minutes ago called me a maid was now begging for his life desperately. You are my wife. We've been together 20 years suffering. Please don't abandon me. Talk to that lawyer of yours and tell him to stop the executives. If you ask them, I'm sure they'll forgive us." I looked down at him and answered with a voice of ice. "But didn't you just tell me a little while ago that you had handed the divorce papers into the courthouse? That wasn't accepted, right? Legally, we're still husband and wife. The husband's debts are also the wife's responsibility." He was selfish and a coward to the very end. I let out a deep sigh. Number 1. You acquired the company debt personally, fraudulently mortgaging the assets. I have no obligation to pay it. Furthermore, I have already transferred all my assets to a secure account in my name. The only thing I have left is a new life. Wait, and the house? What's going to happen to the house we live in? My mother is there. Sterling mentioned the existence of his mother as a desperate last card. I paused before heading for the exit. I looked over my shoulder and gave him the most sincere smile of the entire day. "Oh, don't worry about Beatrice. When I found out you were going to kick me out and move into a penthouse with Sloane, she got so happy, threw out her old clothes, and prepared for the move. That's why this afternoon I prepared the best of gifts for her." Sterling's face twisted in terror. My husband still didn't know that while we were here in the restaurant, Beatrice was being sent to hell itself. "The best of gifts? What did you do to my mother?" Sterling's voice cracked ridiculously from fear and nerves. "What did I do?" "Well, I fulfilled your plans exactly as you wanted." I smiled silently, pulled a trifold brochure from my purse, and let it fall softly at Sterling's feet. It was a brochure for a very cheap, dilapidated nursing home out on the outskirts of Joliet. "I found this brochure in the back of your drawer. It's the nursing home you already signed a contract with in secret to forcibly put your mother in on the day you moved into the new apartment with Sloane, right?" "Ah." Sterling held his breath and looked away from the brochure. "Well, you see, before I left the house today, I called the facility. I told them, my husband's moving plans have been moved up. Come pick up my mother-in-law today at 5:00 p.m. And since you had already paid the entry fee and signed the contract using embezzled company money, the whole process was super fast." Sterling's face paled even more. I began to recount what had happened at 5:00 p.m. at the house. At 5:00, a somewhat battered van from the facility arrived. 2 employees in work uniforms went up to your mother's room. She was waiting for them sitting in her wheelchair in the middle of the room, surrounded by trash bags with her old clothes, convinced that Sloane was going to buy her expensive dresses for the penthouse. "I'm going to my son's penthouse. A wonderful daughter-in-law named Sloane is picking me up," she told them. I remembered my mother-in-law kicking and screaming at that unbelievable reality. The same arrogant old woman who had despised me for my poor background for 20 years. In the end, she had been betrayed by her son and expelled to a dump of a nursing home. The people from the facility were very blunt. "The son signed with us. We don't know anything about any penthouse. She started screaming and crying and called your phone 1,000 times, but you had it turned off so no one would interrupt your fantastic romantic dinner." "Ah." Sterling grabbed his head and curled up on the floor. The plan to abandon his mother had been hatched by himself, but he never thought it would be revealed in such a cruel way just at the moment he was supposed to be tasting glory. Beatrice, realizing that her own son and the young mistress had deceived and abandoned her, collapsed without even being able to articulate a word. And so, with just the clothes on her back, they took her away in the van. That is the end of the mother you cared for so much. When I finished speaking, the restaurant was enveloped in a graveyard silence. Sterling's appearances, his prestige, his facade as a grand CEO, everything shattered into pieces. Ah. Sterling let out a scream like a beast and fell to his knees. Then he crawled to my feet, pressing his forehead against the floor in an unbelievable posture. Rosalind, I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. I beg you forgive me. A middle-aged man, dressed in a designer suit, prostrated on the floor, crying and begging publicly, his face covered in tears and snot, before the woman he used to despise as a useless maid. I've opened my eyes. That woman deceived me. I've lost the company, the house, my mother. I only have you left, Rosalind. Help me, like in the old days. If you're here, I'm sure we can start from scratch. Looking down at him so pathetic, I let out a sigh. There wasn't a speck of anger or sadness left, only absolute indifference toward this man. Sterling, you have always been selfish and only cared about yourself. My cold voice fell over his head. To me, the time I supported you and we swore to strive together, even if we were poor, was a treasure. But you, as the company grew, started seeing me only as a useful tool. No matter how much I wore myself out physically and mentally caring for your mother, you never protected me. I was just really busy with work. I don't want to hear excuses. I cut him off sharply. The fact that you let yourself be carried away by Sloan, devoured the company's assets, and tried to make me a guarantor of a debt to kick me out of my own home. That will never disappear. You yourself killed my existence with your own hands. A dead heart does not resurrect. At my flat rejection, Sterling put on a face of total despair and collapsed on the floor. Next to him, Sloan, who had been crying with her face covered, suddenly stood up. Yeah, it's all this man's fault. I haven't done anything wrong. I was the one deceived. Sloan kicked Sterling with her stiletto heels while he was still on the floor and hugged her bag. Give me my 6 months back. I slept with you because you said you were the CEO, and it turns out you have more than $1 million in debt. What a broke loser. Don't drag me into this. Sloan yelled that and turned around, ready to run toward the door. However, her escape was interrupted almost immediately. Excuse me, miss. The restaurant manager, a middle-aged man, stepped in Sloane's path with a calm but authoritative voice. Before you leave, please settle the bill. The tasting menu for 2 and the vintage champagne come to a total of $600. Seeing the black leather folder the manager handed her, Sloane's face crumbled. Why should I pay? This man has to pay. He's supposed to be the CEO, Sloane yelled, pointing at Sterling lying on the floor. The manager shot a glacial look at Sterling. From what I've been able to hear, this gentleman has his accounts and companies frozen. It doesn't seem to me that he has the solvency to pay. It is only logical that you, his companion, take care of the bill. No way I came to be treated. I don't carry $600 in my purse. Sloane began to shriek. Sterling, in turn, took out a credit card and offered it to the manager. Take it. Pay with this. It must still have a limit. The manager took the card in silence and headed to the register, but returned almost immediately to announce the harsh reality. I am very sorry. This card is declined. It can't be. Sterling's personal accounts and cards had already been frozen thanks to the rapid maneuvers of Harrison and Vance. See, you really don't have a dime to your name. You're the worst. Disgusting. Sloane yelled at Sterling, almost spitting on him. Sterling grabbed the hem of Sloane's dress, screaming, You ordered the champagne, you pay for it. And the two of them engaged in a ridiculous fight right in the entryway of the restaurant. The patrons shot them icy glares. And the manager calmly warned them he was going to call the police. It was the most miserable and pathetic end for a couple who swore eternal love and dreamed of a brilliant future. I contemplated that hellish scene one last time and took a deep breath. The heavy clouds that had oppressed my heart for 20 years cleared all at once, as if by magic. More than the joy of revenge, what filled my chest was the deep and serene relief of finally getting my own life back. Goodbye, Sterling. I hope what's left of your life is a little more honest. I murmured softly, almost to myself. I turned my back to them, leaving them to fight, and walked out the back door of the restaurant. One of the waiters kindly opened the door for me. I gave a slight bow and walked out. The Chicago night was quite chilly, but my heart was surprisingly warm. The touch of my new bank ledger and the key to the small apartment where I would live from now on tucked in my purse promised me a certain future. It's all over. I looked up at the starry sky, and in the clear autumn night shone a cold but beautiful moon. I took a deep breath and took the first step toward my new life. However, my battle had not completely concluded. The next morning when I woke up in my new apartment, I received unbelievable news on my phone. It would be the news of Sterling's last flail and the definitive finishing blow that would fall upon him. The next morning, I woke up to the soft sunlight streaming through the gap in the curtains. My new home was a small 400 square foot apartment in a 10-year-old building. Compared to the massive Lake Forest mansion, it was tiny, but to me, every corner of this small room was full of freedom and peace. It was my own castle. I boiled water in the kitchen and quietly made a coffee. Until yesterday, I was getting up at 5:00 a.m. to make him low-sodium food, worried about his blood pressure, and serving dishes with the fear of ruining Sterling's mood. But starting today, I no longer had to worry about anyone's expressions. I could use my time just for me. That simple fact slowly warmed my frozen heart. Just as I took a sip of coffee, my cell phone vibrated on the table. The lawyer's name appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Thank you so much for everything yesterday." When I answered, the lawyer's voice sounded calm and relieved. "Good morning, Rosalind. Did you sleep well? You see, early this morning I got a call from the police station regarding Sterling. He has been arrested." "Oh, really?" It turned out that last night in front of the restaurant, Sterling and Sloan had gotten into a physical altercation, and the police, alerted by the neighbors, took them away in a patrol car. There, Sterling tried his last dirty trick. According to what they told me during the interrogation, Sterling suddenly started yelling that his wife had stolen all his money, that the executives and his wife had conspired to take his company from him. He tried to file charges against Vance and me for embezzlement. Completely lost and a victim of panic, the man tried one last pathetic tactic to blame others for his misfortunes. But don't worry, Harrison let out a small laugh. Since I figured Sterling was going to lose his mind, I had already spoken with a contact at the precinct. They notified me immediately, and I presented the voice recording you made. The recording of when he lied to me saying the loan guarantee was company insurance. Exactly. Hearing how he deceived his wife to use her as a shield, and knowing he mortgaged company assets to take out predatory loans of $1.5 million, the police didn't even entertain his complaint. On the contrary, they've opened a formal investigation against him for document fraud and corporate embezzlement. He is still in a holding cell and won't be getting out for now. His last attempt at a counterattack only served to put the noose around his own neck. Since no one has gone to pay his bail, they say he cries asking for you in the interrogations. He is a truly pathetic man. I see. I let out a silent sigh. The man I loved, with whom I swore to grow old. Imagining him crying miserably behind cold iron bars didn't produce any emotion in me. It was like hearing the end of a distant tragedy that had nothing to do with me. During the following weeks, the world of that family collapsed completely. Sterling was formally sued by the executives and ousted from his position as CEO. The $1.5 million debt fell on him as a personal liability, forcing him to declare bankruptcy. The impressive mansion was foreclosed on by the bank. From now on, he would have to live with a criminal record and hounded by debt, working whatever jobs he could to survive in the most absolute loneliness. Sloan didn't come out unscathed either. All the luxury items and money she had received from Sterling came from embezzled money, so the company filed a lawsuit demanding full restitution. Furthermore, I made sure to sue her for emotional distress and alienation of affection. The older gentleman who was going to be her next prey quickly found out about her police scandals and dumped her. She was fired from her job and disappeared into the Chicago night loaded with debts. She who tried to destroy the lives of others using only her youth and beauty ended up paying very dearly for her nerve. And Beatrice continues to live in that dilapidated nursing home in Joliet. Apparently at first she would yell at the employees saying, "I am the mother of a CEO. Take me to my luxury penthouse right now." But when the facility director explained to her that Sterling was arrested and that they had lost the house, she finally understood reality and spent the entire night crying her eyes out. To her, who despised me for my humble origins and cared only about appearances, her son, her pride, had become a criminal, and the young daughter-in-law who flattered her was from the very beginning a gold digger who only wanted her money. In this world, the only person who had cared for her sincerely and worried about her health was me. I want to see Rosalind one more time. I want to ask her for forgiveness. They say she mutters that daily in her bed at the nursing home, but I will never set foot in that place again. By late November, when the cold wind began to blow, a letter from the courthouse arrived. It was the final divorce decree. With Sterling's arrest and his unconditional surrender, the legal process managed through the lawyers had finally been completed. I looked at the paper in silence and took a deep breath. My 20 years of marriage had definitively come to an end. That afternoon, I went to a coffee shop where I had agreed to meet someone. Rosalind, as I walked in, Vance stood up to greet me. His face no longer reflected that shadowed exhaustion. Now he looked clear and radiant. "Vance, it's been a while. Have things calmed down at the company?" "Yes. Thanks to you preventing the capital flight, we managed to avoid the worst. We are now leading a new phase under a different name. None of the young employees have left." Vance gave a deep bow. "Rosalind, truly thank you so much. You saved our lives." "No, I just closed a chapter of my own life. If the company was saved, it's because you and the others supported it with honesty. Vance looked at me with a sincere and somewhat hesitant expression. Rosalind, if you wanted, wouldn't you like to come back and work with us in accounting? Right now, we need someone as meticulous and precise as you. That warm offer put a lump in my throat. For 20 years, I was treated like a useless nobody in my own home, believing no one needed me. And now someone was asking me to be by their side. Holding back tears, I gently shook my head. I appreciate it very much, Vance, but from now on, I want to live my life peacefully. At my own pace, I replied with a smile. During my 20 years of marriage, I always lived for others, for my husband's company to care for my mother-in-law. That's why the time I have left in life, I want to use it to fill my own heart. I had recently started working part-time at a small neighborhood flower shop. The pay wasn't very high, but spending my days enveloped in the smell of earth and flowers, arranging bouquets to make customers smile, gave me an astonishing peace. I see. If that's your decision, we will support you 100%. But come visit us whenever you want. We'll always be on your side. I nodded from the bottom of my heart at Vance's kind words. Leaving the coffee shop, I took a bus toward Rose Hill Cemetery where my parents were buried. The cold wind rustled the yellow leaves of the trees. Standing in front of the well-kept headstone, I lit a candle. I closed my eyes and brought my hands together. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you. I finally got out of that family and now I'm on my own. A lot has happened, but I'm doing very well. I'm glad I lived honestly and sincerely just like you taught me. I opened my eyes and looked at my left hand. On my ring finger remained a faint white mark from the ring I wore for 20 years. Neither that cheap silver ring nor the tens of thousands of dollars in diamonds Sterling tried to give his mistress were part of my life anymore. Surely with time, this mark will also slowly fade away. Well, it's time to go home, I murmured, looking up at the sky. A blue sky, without a single cloud, stretched out infinitely. 48 years old, I still had half my life ahead of me. My steps were light, and my heart overflowed with a quiet hope toward my new days.